I'm Jason with Born Handy, and I'm very happy to say that we're finally wrapping up the ultimate 75-gallon aquarium build as an entire project. And in this video, we're going to go over some of the things that I'm the most proud of and talk about how the system works as a whole. I got a list in hand because I got a pretty long list of items that I want to talk about as far as what I've done to build this aquarium. And I'm going to start off with what, in my opinion, was the single most important achievement of this build, and that's going to be the canopy lift system. That is a 100-pound oak canopy. That canopy was able to be lifted up by myself with around 15 to 20 pounds of lift effort, and it stays in position, and it's actually tall enough for a 5-gallon bucket to be able to reach underneath and do everything that I have to do. And of course, with the canopy in the upright position, it exposes the controls and the electronics and the dedicated internet and those sort of things that go with this aquarium. And then of course, it's as easy as just lifting off my screen covers, and then I can access the top, feed the fish, which of course they're begging for food at this point. And anything else I need to do in terms of cleaning. So even though the canopy lift was my single most proud moment, it's actually not the moment that received the most views on the internet. The video that gets the most views at the time of this video, about 3 times more views, is the video of the sump. Admittedly, as far as homemade sumps go, it is a pretty nice sump, and it does fill almost the entire under cabinet of the aquarium. That sump is probably much larger than what you would see in a typical 75-gallon aquarium. But in my instance, I knew that I was going to have additional storage, so under cabinet storage became less of a concern. I also knew that I wanted to maximize water volume and have a massive refugium. So we have a large refugium, we have a large sump, a huge water volume. There's probably about 40 or 45 additional gallons of water down below that more than makes up for the lost gallons up top when we added corals and live rock and fish. So this system, although a 75-gallon total, is probably close to 100 gallons in total water volume when filled up and operational. This aquarium is hard plumbed with colored PVC. I mostly did that because I was seeing a lot of the colored PVC builds on the internet, particularly the ones featured on the Bulk Reef Supply channel. And it looks so good, I just really guess I couldn't resist myself. I went ahead and bought some colored PVC pipe, and that's something that I definitely do not regret. Yes, it cost a little bit more money. Yes, I had to wait on the plumbing, but I'm happy every time I open the cabinet and look in there to see that blue pipe. And it gives me a sense that everything under there was purpose-built for this project and not as many things off the shelf. That may sound kind of silly to the most practical reefers among us, but in my case, this is a 100% custom project, and I wanted every portion of that project to reflect that it was custom, and the colored PVC is just another piece of that puzzle. I'm a huge subscriber to the notion that you don't need a UV sterilizer to be successful, but early on in this build, I had at one point decided that this aquarium's showpiece fish was going to be a powder blue tang, and so that being the case, I wanted some UV sterilizer for some extra protection. Since then, I have decided that my showpiece fish is actually a purple tang. They're just a hardier fish and a lot less finicky and much easier to keep over the long term. Plus, they were available in a really small size as opposed to the powder blues that I was seeing. We're really kind of already at the limit of what the size of this aquarium would allow. For a skimmer, I'm using a Vertex Omega 130. I have a Neptune Core 20 return pump. And the interesting thing about that return pump is I run that pump at almost 100% capacity, which is way more than most people would probably run for a 75-gallon aquarium. But you'll notice in the display tank, I am completely devoid of any sort of protein skimmers or additional water movement. And in spite of that, I have really, really good water flow, but at the same time, I'm not pressure washing the rock with 2,000 gallons per hour. And that's achieved through using a larger diameter lock line than what most people use. Typically what you see is 1/2 inch. I have gone ahead and gone with 3/4 inch lock line, and that allows greater water volume without that pressure washer sensation. If you think about it like this, if you turn a water hose on full blast and run that water across your arm, it's going to feel like a very gentle flow, even though that's the maximum capability of that water hose. By contrast, if you put a nozzle on there that allows you to do a jet stream, you've greatly reduced the flow, but greatly increased the velocity of the water, and you get that uncomfortable pressure washer sensation. And that's just not something that I wanted to introduce into my aquarium. So we did go with the 3/4 lock line, and I'm happy I did. And that brings me to the overflow system for the tank. The actual overflow box is a homemade overflow. It is the Bean Animal system, and I use it to get almost dead silence out of the aquarium. In fact, when I have this thing tuned correctly, the only thing on the aquarium that you're able to hear at all is the protein skimmer. And when the protein skimmer is off, you would almost question whether or not the aquarium was even running. And that leads me right into drilling the aquarium on my own. I went ahead and ventured to do that self-drilling because I watched some of the bulk reef supply videos where they were drilling the aquariums. And although I understood that it came with some risk, they really just kind of made it seem a lot easier than I had always believed that it was. And I'm glad that I went down that road. Having said that, I did break the first tank that I tried to drill simply because I took the word of the manufacturer that the only pane of the aquarium that was tempered was the bottom. And since I was going to be drilling the back, that wasn't a concern. Well, as it turns out, the representative for the manufacturer that I spoke with over the phone was dead wrong. And sometimes they do offer these aquariums with every panel being tempered. So of course, when I tried to drill the aquarium, it exploded. It's pretty disappointing, but not the end of the world. And in the grand scheme of things of what a system like this costs, really wasn't that big of a financial setback. It just set me back a little bit of time. I went ahead and ordered a replacement aquarium from glasscages.com. I want to give a shout out to them. They definitely promised me that none of their aquariums have any tempered glass anywhere. And of course, when I got this tank, I was really impressed by how much thicker the glass was, and it drilled fairly easily. Now, it took me a long time to drill just because I was inexperienced and I went probably unnecessarily slow. But at the end of the day, I drilled 4 holes in this aquarium flawlessly on what amounts to my second attempt ever at glass drilling. So I'm going to say, if you're considering drilling the glass and maybe it spooks you off a little bit, my suggestion is to go ahead and try it. I don't think you'll be sorry with the results once you're finished. This aquarium is controlled by the Apex controller. I'm using one of the Apex Classics. This is something that I couldn't afford to buy everything all at once. I had to buy all this stuff a little piece at a time here and there. The Apex controller was the first thing that I bought. My school of thought was to buy the most painful things up front, and then everything else will feel a lot easier to purchase when the time comes. And that worked for me. I'm not saying that would work for you, but that definitely worked for me. As painful as it was to buy the Apex Classic, at the time I just couldn't bring myself to buy the full Apex. The only difference really being for me that one was wireless and one needed a dedicated wire. Well, running an internet wire is just not a problem for me, and so I did buy the Classic. Having said that, I do wish sometimes that I had went ahead and sprung for the newer model, just because some of the newer devices that are available for the newer Apex that are not backwards compatible with the Apex Classic. So if you're considering a build like this, maybe on this video looking for some inspiration, take that advice. I would advise you to go ahead and buy the best Apex you can buy, or at least the best aquarium controller. You don't have to buy an Apex. One of the other things that I'm pretty proud of on this aquarium is the do-it-yourself hybrid T5 LED light fixture. I'm using Kessel LEDs as well as a T5 retro kit that I purchased from Bulk Reef Supply. That T5 retro kit and the LEDs are affixed to a polished aluminum sign shop panel. This is the kind of panel that sign shops use to let everyone know about a business or themselves or whoever it is. These panels are pretty expensive, but they can be cut to whatever custom shape you want, which is what we have here. And these are a great option for somebody who's looking to do a completely one-off custom build. One of the other things that comes with having an aquarium like this is as the corals grow, they uptake minerals out of the water, namely calcium, among other things. But as those minerals are pulled out, they have to be replaced and replenished. Certainly water changes go a long way to do that, but at the growth rate of some of these corals, water changes alone are never going to give you the full replenishment that you need out of an aquarium like this. So for me, I did go ahead and do an automatic top-off system to make up fresh water over there on this hutch cabinet. And on this side, we make up the lost calcium as the corals grow. I'm using a kalkwasser system. It may be that one day I'll graduate to a calcium reactor that can be hidden under this cabinet. But for now, I'm using kalkwasser and I'm very happy with that. I know a lot of people who use auto top-off systems will mix their kalkwasser in with their auto top-off reservoir. That's something I chose not to do. I just didn't want the calcium infused water to shorten the life of the pump. And so by having 2 separate buckets, I can have dedicated calcium infusion without running through the pump that can have a negative impact on. And the calcium water can be made up through a dosing pump that is purpose built for exactly that sort of thing. And so as far as I'm concerned, that extends the life of all the products in the aquarium. And that was one of the things that I'm going for, is although there's no such thing as a maintenance-free aquarium, I didn't see any reason to increase the frequency of having to maintenance at least that portion of the aquarium in the auto top-off pump. As a side benefit of the hutches to conceal the buckets, I get to do some displays on the side where I can show off the kinds of things that are on the cabinets, things that I've collected over the years through a lifetime of just traveling the world and seeing something that I wanted, and I thought one day I'd like to have that displayed in my home, and that one day has become now, as I have items. Almost everything up here has a backstory, has some sort of story that I can tell you of where I got it, or how I found it, or where I purchased it from. And some of them are even historical, such as this wagon wheel hub that was found in a very remote part of Alabama that used to be a main thoroughfare between two counties. There's really no way to know how old it is, but it definitely came from the days of covered wagons and horses. Of course, the colors of the cabinet were inspired by the fossils that I display on either side. These fish fossils I felt like went very well with an aquarium themed display. And these fish fossils are real. They were found at a site where you go and you pay money, and they let you search for fossils in the Green River Formation in Wyoming. The only fossil that isn't real, of course, is the one up above. I don't have the kind of money that it would cost to buy a fossil of that size. That is a reproduction. I want to give a shout out to the Smithsonian Institute for making that three-dimensional model available for download. And of course, I used my CNC router to carve the fossil and then painted it to match. I'd also like to give a pretty big shout out to Ryan over at Bulk Reef Supply. Certainly Ryan at Bulk Reef Supply doesn't need me to tell anyone about him, but the reality is I've been out of this hobby for more than 15 years and just one day stumbled across one of his videos on the internet, and even though it wasn't something that I was searching for, watching his video sort of reignited an interest that I had in this hobby that had sort of subsided. And so even though I always knew at one point I was going to have a nice tank one day, I just didn't think it would have been right away. But after I found his videos, I did decide to move forward and build the tank. And the truth is, a lot of the factual information that used to be the gold standard when I was in the hobby had long since become outdated. And Ryan and the team over at Bulk Reef Supply were able to either prove or disprove a lot of the things that we believed as truths back in the day. And so I was able to build an aquarium that's probably better than I would have ever been able to do based off the knowledge that I had back when I had been a reefer earlier. So with all that out of the way, let me go ahead and thank you for watching this video to the end. I hope you enjoyed. If you are enjoying this content and you haven't done so already, be sure and give me a subscribe. You never know when I'm going to publish something else later on. And although this aquarium is not really what the source content is for my channel, this is something I'm probably going to do periodic updates on, just because this is not one of those projects that's ever completely finished. A reef aquarium is something that grows with the aquarist, and as tastes change, as abilities change, and skill levels change, the types of things in the aquarium will also change as well. Plus, I think reefers as a whole like to see corals grow. They like to see this is how old a coral is now. This is what it looked like when I first put it in the tank. Those are some of the things that I will probably include in later video series. So, having said all those things, until next time, this is Jason with Born Handy.